Okay, you guys, this is part two of your 6.5 flipped classroom. So if you haven't watched part one yet, stop! Do not pass go! Don't collect $200. Go back and watch part one and then come join me for part two when you're ready. If you're in the right place, then you know we were talking about predestination. The idea that God's already chosen who's going to heaven and who's not before they were ever born. The number one question I always get about this from students is, well, wait a minute. If it's already been decided, then why the heck wouldn't you do whatever you wanted while you were alive? Steal, cheat, murder, throw parties, and, do everything in excess and sin as much as you want because, hey, you're already going to go to heaven. Well, here's the thing about that. If you were a Calvinist, you had a very particular idea in mind about who obviously would be the ones getting to go to heaven. They must obviously be the most holy, the most religious, the most kind, the best behaved people of the bunch, right? I mean, that's who deserves to go to heaven. So it must be them. And so actually it was the opposite. You didn't have a whole bunch of people doing whatever the heck they wanted and breaking every law because it didn't matter. You actually had people striving to be the best they could be. You had people behaving and minding their P's and Q's every day, all the time, no matter what, because you walked around wanting to believe that you were one of the elect, the chosen ones by God to get to go to heaven one day. No one wants to picture their eternity, their soul for all of time being in the bad place instead of the good place, right? And so people would actually be quite well behaved and do good deeds and help the poor and go to church all the time because those must be the people that get to go to heaven, right? And so it did not show a lot of bad behavior. It actually multiplied people's good behavior because they wanted to think they were one of the chosen. All right, so that's kind of what sets Calvinism apart by far and away is predestination. That's a big one. You want to remember that one, okay? If you need more time, push pause, okay? Give yourself a left-hand side question. Draw a line underneath everything we just wrote. And here we go. Moving on to ultimate source of authority. Okay, just like Lutheranism, they believed that the Bible is the ultimate source of authority. No pope or person with a special title had to be the person that told you what the Bible meant or what God was trying to teach you. Anybody could interpret it for themselves. All right, if predestination is by far what sets Calvinism apart from the other religions, like number two, the second thing that kind of sets them apart is the idea of a theocracy. Say that one. You might have never heard that one before. Theocracy. Theocracy. A theocracy is a type of government. And ultimately, the head of that government, if you were looking at government power in a pyramid, the person at the top of government power in a theocracy would be God. Okay? Well, wait a second. Whether you are a Christian or an atheist or have some other faith besides Christianity, I think everybody kind of realizes it's not like you can phone God up and have a two-way conversation and he's going to talk back very clearly and you guys can be pen pals and email pals and Instagram pals. Like, nope, it doesn't work that way. So how can God be the head of the government? Well, ultimately, what that really means is that the Bible is the head of your government. You're going to look to the Bible to figure out the type of laws that you and your community want to follow, what right from wrong is, and that sort of thing. This is not unlike when you guys earlier this year were studying Islam, and when it spread into West Africa, a lot of the West African kings looking to the Quran, the holy book of Islam, to figure out laws, right? And how to go about running society. So it's the same kind of idea. God's the ultimate source of authority, and the church leaders need to be well versed enough in their Bible and educated enough about Bible books, which there's 66 books inside the Bible between the Old and New Testament, to be able to create laws and push them out to society for them to follow. Because in Calvinism, you typically had groups of Calvinists that would live together in communities. Okay, so you might have, the government's rules to follow, but Calvinists tended to live around other Calvinists, and besides that would follow these Calvinistic laws based off of a theocracy. All right. If you need more time, make sure you push pause because we're moving on. Give yourself a left-hand side question and draw a line underneath everything you just wrote. All right. How about rituals and worship? Again, kind of like when we studied Islam, they do not typically show Muhammad in traditional Islamic mosques or in traditional Islamic faith because we're not sure exactly what Muhammad looked like, and you shouldn't be focused on Muhammad anyway. He was just the messenger. You should be focused on Allah, on God. Okay? Calvinism's kind of the same way. Why do you need to be looking at pictures of what you think Jesus looked like? Because guess what? Nobody knows what Jesus looked like, right? So it's kind of the same idea. No crosses with Jesus on them, no pictures of Jesus or the saints or anything in the Bible. That was kind of a ritualistic thing that makes them set apart from Catholics who really do like their crucifixion crosses and often have statues of Jesus or the saints or different people within the Bible and the biblical stories. Okay. Calvinists, they were hardcore, man. You went to church at least 5 times a week. Each sermon could last half the day. It could go on for hours and hours. Men and women typically were separated. Sometimes children were in a third section or with the women, and they would randomly stop the sermon, pick on some kid and say, hey, what did I just say? Or what's the answer to this question? And you better know. You better know the answer, or else it was a disgrace to your entire family. It was a big deal, right? So talk about being in the hot seat. All right, if you need more time, then push pause because we're moving on. All right, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. This is typically what you guys remember about Calvinism. Even though predestination and theocracy are by far more important, what everybody always walks away with, you know, in June when we reflect back on what you've learned, what you remember about Calvinism is they are like anti anything you guys would consider fun. Okay. Calvinism was a very serious society. It was about being God and religious focused. There were no dance parties, like events of any type. There was no gambling allowed. You were not allowed to wear fancy clothing because why are you showing off? What makes you better than somebody else? Why do you need to look fancy? Like, what's wrong with people who look common in comparison to that, right? So they looked at it as being judgmental. Even singing, a lot of different types of games and things that kids would play or adults might play at a party or whatnot, not allowed. Fortune telling, a definite no-no, okay? So no things that you guys all put in kind of one big pot as all the fun stuff. Yeah, they're not allowed to do that. It was church, 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 pray, 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 do your job, do your job, do your job, teach your family, teach your family, teach your family, sleep, eat, repeat, okay? And they would actually have inspections. People from the Calvinist church would come to your house, go through your closet, make sure you're not hiding some like fancy dress in the back, or make sure you're not hiding a board game back there or any type of music and things because you weren't supposed to be doing that stuff. All right, if you need more time, push pause because here we go. There's also on the flipped classroom area of the website this video clip. If you want to know more about John Calvin or Calvinism, I would recommend watching the video clips, guys. They are super helpful for sure. Okay, all right, Anglicanism. Anglicanism is started by a king named King Henry VIII. Now, if we go forward a little bit, you guys know from the Renaissance that his daughter is Queen Elizabeth I. Remember, she knew Shakespeare and really promoted the arts and education and equality and things in England during the Renaissance. Well, her dad was King Henry VIII, and he's the one that starts the Anglican Church. So the Anglican Church or Anglicanism or the Church of England. You might hear it any of those ways. It's all the same thing. Anglicanism, Anglican Church, the Church of England. And how it starts is that he was Catholic. All of England was Catholic. For years and years and years and years and years, they'd all been Catholic. And he'd been married to his first wife, Catherine, for about 20 years. And in that time, they had a daughter together named Mary, but she was never able to produce a son. And he wanted a son because he wanted someone to pass his, title down to. A girl wasn't good enough because there weren't ever very many girls in power. So he wanted a boy. and Catherine had not given him a boy, and so he wanted a divorce. Well, he goes to the Pope and he says, "Hey, Mr. Pope man, can I have a divorce from my wife? I need a son." And the Pope said, "Yeah, the Catholic Church doesn't really do divorce. God frowns upon divorce. No, you cannot have one, King Henry of England." And King Henry VIII was like, excuse me, I'm the King of England, so I can do what I want. And he decides that the whole entire country of England's not going to be Catholic anymore. So he can get his divorce. He creates an entirely new Christian religion, okay? Anglicanism. And guess what's allowed? Just take one guess. What's allowed in Anglicanism? You're so smart. Divorce, right? So under certain circumstances, at least, divorce was allowed in Anglicanism. So he divorces his first wife and ends up marrying Anne Boleyn, who he'd been having an affair with anyway. And that marriage, his second marriage, is the one that will produce Elizabeth, who will end up becoming the famous Queen of England, right? So if he only knew, like, you wanted a son this whole time, but man, it was your daughters that become famous, because Mary's famous in her own right from his first marriage, but especially Elizabeth, super famous, one of the best monarchs we've ever had in any country ever, and it was a girl. If only King Henry VIII had known. He ends up getting tired of Anne Boleyn, his second wife, and he beheads her. Not personally, but he has her beheaded. And he will go on to marry 4 more times after that. So altogether, King Henry VIII was married 6 times during his life. He divorces the first one, kills the second one, the third one dies in childbirth, the fourth one he divorces, the fifth one he also has killed, and then the sixth one outlives him. Okay. Really, he doesn't change a lot. So Anglicanism looks a whole heck of a lot like Catholicism, except for some small differences. One of them being you can get a divorce under certain circumstances. And the second one being, just, take a guess, because the king's the one making this. Who's going to have all the power? Not the Pope, right? So the Pope has no authority according to Anglicanism. The person that has all the authority is the King of England. So in this case, him, right, for quite a few years, has all the power. And that's one of the biggest differences about Anglicanism. All right, if you're not ready, draw a line across or underneath everything you just wrote, because here we go. The biggest thing about sin and salvation is that it's kind of a mix between the Catholic Church and Lutheranism. He does take a couple of nods to Lutheranism and says he agrees more with Lutheranism than with Catholicism, because he believes that salvation, remember, getting to go to heaven, is in fact a gift from God. He doesn't think it's something that can be earned, which is something the Catholic Church was promoting at that time. He really believes it is a gift. There's no way you could have earned it, right? It's got to be a free gift given to you that you just need to accept. Okay, so he does agree with Lutheran beliefs on that. All right, if you're not ready, then push pause, because off we go to the next slide. Okay, how about the ultimate source of authority? Well, without even looking at the slide, you guys, you should with one guess be able to figure that out. He creates this whole religion because he wants to be large and in charge, right? So of course, it's going to be King Henry VIII, or whoever the monarch of England is, right? That's in charge of Anglicanism, not the Pope. Now, to be fair, he claims that the Bible has the ultimate authority. Okay, so he's saying, according to according to Anglicanism, the Bible is the ultimate authority. But who is going to interpret the Bible? Is it a panel of people? Is it well-scholared, biblical, educated scholars who've been studying the Bible for years and years? No, it's King Henry, okay, and some help with the Bishop of Canterbury and some, a couple other people. But typically, it's really what King Henry VIII wants to make the Bible say. He can say that's what it says, and that's what Anglicans are going to go with. All right, so it's really giving him a lot of power, because now he has religious power and he has government power, and that's like no joke, right? Okay, draw a line, draw a line, draw a line. All right, how about worship and rituals? Very similar to kind of Catholic and Lutheran services. They did have high services that were just for wealthy. You could not attend if you were a commoner. And they had what they called low services for the commoners. They used old Catholic buildings and they just like kind of de-decorated them to make them less fancy. And that's the buildings that they used for Anglicanism. This is the end of part 2, guys. We got one more part in this series, part 3. So when you're ready, I will see you for part 3. See you then.